Audio should be working now. Sorry about that. Yeah, sorry about running late real quick. Wanted to drop by during my lunch break, chop it up with you guys. We had a lot of recent news coming out, right? We have the Davante Adams trade. We have the Hassan Reddick updates that I just posted this morning. And then we just need to quickly overview the state of the AFC East as a whole, too, right? Because it seems like with, of course, another loss to the Buffalo Bills, we are still potentially in the thick of things, right? You take a look at that, our AFC East division, there hasn't been a ton of matchups already between all of the teams, which is why you see the Miami Dolphins, for example, who's a game behind everyone. They're only 2 games behind. The Jets still have opportunities to go out there and claw their way back into potentially fighting for first place. But this has been the crux of the New York Jets for a long time now, right? In that we've had opportunities to not just enter into first place within our division, but of course, be able to control our own destiny as well. And those are a lot of the pivotal moments where it feels like we just fold under pressure, right? And it hasn't mattered what coach, whether it was Rex Ryan, whether it was Adam Gase, whether it's Robert Saleh. You're seeing it now technically with interim head coach Jeff Ulbrich, Todd Bowles. None of those teams have been able to withstand the, I don't even know, peer pressure isn't the right word, but basically the pressure of success and knowing that there's a certain status, a certain level of play that not only the fans, but, you know, NFL at large would expect you to live up to. And we just haven't been able to do that, right? And so we end up relying on a ton of games where, you know, you're seeing like 10-3 losses by the New York Jets, ton of games over the years where we've really been able to hold teams to under 20 points, and we haven't had an offense that's really been able to help live up to their end of the bargain, right? Whether it's been a ton of turnovers, whether it's been ineffective, you know, just playmakers, bad weapons, lack of ball security, or in, you know, what we're seeing in instances this year, just poor coaching and game plan and development around the whole thing. So it'll be interesting to kind of dive into that picture and see. But Davante Adams is 100% the biggest news, right? So even as far as today, you know, looking back on things, obviously it can't do anything but help. I quoted the Allen Lazard experience so far in 2024 as one of the primary reasons why people should be excited seeing Davante Adams in here, because Allen Lazard, you can argue, is probably on target to look like a solid number 2 receiver within the NFL this year. And realistically, he's still playing as the 3rd or 4th option for us in many cases. But he's, regardless of Butterfingers, he's been the most consistent performer. So if you add in a high-profile talent like Davante Adams, a guy that not only clearly can win a lot of his individual matches, but also looking at him on a Raiders team where really he was one of the primary threats on a snap-by-snap basis, and you're seeing Brock Bowers show out some ability from like Trey Tucker, for example. But largely teams are game planning around Davante Adams, and you're seeing him be able to beat bracket coverage. You're seeing him being able to beat double teams, which hasn't been a staple for Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers so far. So one of the beautiful things that I'm looking for, actually 2 things really, is one, can Davante Adams, kind of share the secret sauce of how he's able to get around that, right? And you are technically talking about 2 similar-ish enough skill sets, right, with Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson, but I think they both win in very unique ways, whereas Garrett Wilson's a lot more your start and stop guy, elite in space, very creative when it comes to being able to run his routes and get those additional yards of separation. Davante Adams is pure precision. He's pure timing. And then, of course, he brings, you know, some more power that Garrett Wilson wouldn't necessarily be able to match. So still, he brings all of the same traits from an athletic standpoint that he could utilize. And so I know he's spent time before watching how teams were defending Aaron Rodgers previously before we signed him. And that gave him obviously some looks at what it was Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers was able to do. I don't think he needs to mimic it by any chance, But the second thing to also really look forward to is the fact that they asked it during the press conference today, which is one of the better questions that's been out there recently. Will we look to see Garrett Wilson in the slot more often now with Davante Adams being out there? Because now you can roll out a more acceptable package, right? Davante and Mike on the boundaries, Garrett Wilson on the inside. It could be a lethal combination, 100%, right? So you take a look at what he did back at Ohio State, and Garrett Wilson, we all knew that he could probably make it work on the boundary. He was absolutely an animal in the slot. So I wouldn't expect anything to change. I don't know what the what's good, Harlan. Appreciate you coming through, my man. I don't know what the division in terms of if you look at his stats would be for the splits right now, but I would imagine he's probably having more success from the slot than he was having on the boundary so far, where you've seen a lot of timing issues, a lot of miscommunication. I don't want to say some drops because I don't know where Garrett Wilson is at with that on the season, but definitely some grabs where it feels like he probably should have been able to haul those in, and they got broken up. So I'm looking forward to that entire thing. It does shake things up a little bit. If we're going to go all in, go all in. I know a lot of people are saying, there's the rumor circulating about Mike Williams, and I know he was out from practice today. And I think they just cited personal reasons for it. But keep that level of talent there, right? Because next year you're still going to be looking at a crazy cap situation. You have to figure out how you're going to maintain Aaron Rodgers. You're going to have to figure out if you keep him, you're keeping the other. So what are you going to do with Davante Adams? You've already added on, I believe they lowered his cap hit this year to 3-point-something million by adding some additional void years, right? And he's already taken up again $34-ish million over the next 2 years. That's just two players that might account for over, $70 million in cap space. So we'll see ultimately what happens, right? Whether he wants to ride off into the sunset after this year or whatever the situation is, we're going to need to have a game plan. But for this year specifically, if it doesn't work out, nothing in 2025 is really going to matter, because you're going to have to deal with not only all of this dead cap space, you're going to have to deal with the fact that you're blowing up the entire organization again. Joe Douglas is most likely gone. I probably guarantee it. Jeff Ulbrich, he entered into an unenviable situation by having to replace Robert Saleh and not necessarily being able to provide answers to the offense. He can provide an energy. He can look to make some things work that from a process standpoint, maybe Robert Saleh wasn't. Having a new voice in the building always ends up helping things out. But ultimately, if things don't work out this year, none of these acquisitions matter. Hassan Reddick, whether he plays for us or not, Davante Adams, Aaron Rodgers acquisition would clearly be a failure. It was always going to be Super Bowl or bust. After we brought him in, after you heard Woody Johnson fanboying over the fact that he thought we were just a QB away, and Zach Wilson was really the cause of a lot of the failures and success that we were having as an organization, as a team, with the way the defense was playing and with the talent level that we had at the time in Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson, which you can argue a lot of other teams would have been able to make work. All the Jets receivers seems to have the dropsies. Yeah, this is one of the more frustrating things, particularly when I look at like Mike Williams, for example, because if it's not dropping a ball that basically hits him in the stomach, it feels like he's slipping, feels like he's not really grasping the playbook necessarily from a timing perspective. This is what he's meant to do, right? But, there hasn't been anything beyond the catch and traffic type situations, which it feels like he offered more ability with the Chargers in terms of being able to become kind of a run after catch monster, in terms of being able to, play bully ball against some of these guys. So it is frustrating to see in a world where you have a lineup that looks like, and, prior to Davante Adams coming over, Garrett Wilson, Mike Williams, you can argue, Xavier Gibson at the time in terms of being a slot guy, but Allen Lazard, Allen should not look like the next best guy for you after Garrett Wilson. And technically, you can make the case that Allen Lazard has looked like the best wide receiver for us at certain points. And I know the fantasy guys will definitely back that up. But yeah, it's just really an anomaly. I don't want to put it all on the shoulder of Aaron Rodgers because, coaching has a lot to do with it. Dano, my guy, was good, my man. Coaching 100% has a lot to do with it. The other piece is a lot of what frustrated me coming into the season was, and you got to have fun, right? We're talking about a team that's still full of young bulls and stars. You got people talking about 2K and Madden and the new college football games that are coming out and all this extracurricular stuff that they're doing. If you're going to do that, do it, but don't put it out there in the media, right? Because the moment we start seeing what's happening now, where we're not winning games that we should have, or we're leaving a lot of plays out there on the field for what should be routine catches, routine runs, routine blocking from some of the top tier guys in the world reaching the NFL level, you're going to get backlash for it, right? And I don't think anybody's really called them out from that perspective of it, but what else could it be, right? You're having breakdowns at every single level. And for a team that's largely been more of a passing offense than necessarily a running one, even though we've been in this run, pass kind of mantra, it hasn't worked out in our favor. It is really starting to tick a lot of people off, right? I can see the change in hearing guys like Jet Central, Let's Talk Jets. They always keep it 100%, but I tap in and check out guys like Dano. I see the Afterburners podcast guys, and you can clearly see it's starting to really wear off pretty quick on us. So they should use Stickum. Any Raiders did, yeah. I think they banned the Stickum though, right? It's either gloves or nothing for these guys. Wonder how many touchdowns Lazard has and first downs. Yeah, I think he has. I want to say he has 2 or 3. It might even be 4. And I think he was just coming off like a 100-yard game or something to that effect, something close to it, right? So I don't know. Appreciate that, my man. Wow, Wave, nice to have you in the building. Oh, by the way, I know I was supposed to be trying to run through some of these live streams for Just Therapy at night. Something's going on with my Wi-Fi or something, so it hasn't really been working out that well. So I'm going to just try to run through some of these during the week, hopefully once or twice, same thing, a Tuesday or a Thursday, and then during like a lunch break or something. But appreciate you guys working with me. You think Woody will part with JD after stating this is best roster I've had in 25 years? Yes, and here's why. I would say it would be the prudent move. It would help out Joe Douglas more than us, right? Because I still think Joe Douglas has definitely done the best job of assembling a roster for us. But here's what it comes down to. Let's say that we don't have Aaron Rodgers retire. Let's say that it does make sense in everybody's head. Keep the weapons that you have in the building. Garrett Wilson's still on a rookie contract, but extension talks are going to come. Same thing with Breece Hall, and more so Breece Hall, right? Because he's a second-round pick instead of being a first-rounder like Sauce and Garrett was. You have Jermaine Johnson coming up, bevy of defensive players, right? Tony Adams and the such. But if you decide that you can try to run it back with a better coaching staff, you're limiting yourself. For one, Joe Douglas is now going to be in a situation we've seen time and time again where he has we've switched our model, right? We've had guys that have been on the same tenure contract-wise, but we've also seen the situations, and I think Adam Gase was set up like this, where the GM has been there longer than the head coach is, but he's kind of on a lame duck year, whereas the coach is just coming in fresh, and you're still trying to learn what it is that they're looking for, schemes, quality, traits, athletic must-haves, right, for the scheme and whatever else is going to go on that they want to try to strategize for. Now you have a situation where Joe Douglas is making moves for the right now so he can get his extension and then really try to get on the page with his coaching staff. And the coaching staff is saying, hey, we've had to blow this thing up, but they can't because they're hamstrung. They are locked into a quarterback if Aaron Rodgers doesn't retire. They're locked into a massive contract with Davante Adams, so don't expect any major moves next offseason. And, you may still have this Hassan Reddick situation mulling around if his contract tolls. And then obviously you have the circus that has been Aaron Rodgers with the media and stuff. So it is a lot for an experienced head coach to come in and want to deal with. If all of those guys stay away, as I'd expect, then you're talking about having a rookie head coach that's going to come in, and he'll essentially be in the same situation that we've seen with Robert Saleh, same situation that you're seeing potentially here with Jeff Ulbrich, where they're going to have to bend the knee to Aaron Rodgers, let him run the show, and hopefully he signs off on whatever the game plan is on a weekly basis and the roster management and all this kind of stuff. Like, it's hard to say what more you can actually do for Aaron Rodgers at this point. But it would be an unenviable situation. And if we win, I would still want to kind of clear house, right? Keep Joe Douglas, let him conduct the search. But I would want to move on from Aaron Rodgers. I would want to potentially move on from Davante Adams. I know that was part of his worries for coming over anyways, is if Aaron Rodgers only plays out just this year. But give the new coaching staff every opportunity to actually succeed. I think Joe Douglas can find the talent if he has a coaching staff that knows what they're looking for. They can prove the success behind the model that they're looking at. And I think he can make that work. But if you're asking guys to already be locked into a contract the moment they sign on to coach the New York Jets, you're setting them up for failure. I think I missed some here. Let me see. Do you think we'll shed Mike Williams? I hope not, because yeah. Think about, I want to keep Mike Williams. I've touched on this, but if you think about what's going to happen, speaking of January, speaking of December, right, we're going to start hitting these cold weather games really, really quickly. And for anybody that's on the East Coast, we got a little bit of a taste of how the weather can be, massively damaging for us, right? So 60-mile-per-hour gust is only happening on certain parts of the field. It's streaky. You may have a quarter where nothing's going on. Then you may have, some minor, tornado-like gusts going on. We need to be built to not only have strong run blockers that can help us out, because we're going to have to cater things towards the run game. You want guys that can also pull in those tough catches. And so I would look to see somebody like Mike Williams as he continues to adjust to this game plan, as he continues to get worked into this team. You would expect to see him really start to excel and become a favorite for Aaron Rodgers, where he can really pick apart some of the matches he's going to be looking for. I think it would be a huge waste for what we've seen so far. It's not like he's taken over games. He hasn't really done anything very special, but we've seen the catch and traffic ability here. We've seen some of that sideline ability from him. If he can ever stop slipping, I think we'll have something special here. But I think it would be a complete waste. And you're probably talking about in a trade getting pennies on the dollar, right? If you're not doing a player-for-player trade right now, I don't think anything that's happening is going to really help out the Jets. It would be a move to help set up whatever the next coaching staff, whatever the next front office is going to be. I saw it for 1:30 a.m. last night. I'm like, yeah, man, I tried to get in and it didn't work out. So I know the first stream that I did last week, again, started cutting out on me pretty bad. I was like, fuck it. I'll just, we'll figure out a different way to make it work. If JD goes, think most of the players will probably go after the new regime comes in. Yeah, I mean, I think if a new coaching staff comes in, you still have somewhat of a core, right? Because you'll have Garrett, you'll have Sauce, you'll have Jermaine, you'll have Quincy, you'll have Quinnen. From somewhat of a defensive standpoint, I think the safety room will probably see a huge overhaul again. Linebacker room is relatively okay. You could probably sign Jamie Sherwood to an extension for relatively cheap. And then offensively, you're talking about at least still having Olu. I think John Simpson still has a year, although you'll probably want to try to figure that out. You still have Tippmann. AVT you have to figure out, Morgan Moses you have to figure out. So there's going to be a lot of change here, but I got a feeling we'll have to do a lot of, bargain bin basement shopping again. And that's kind of where Joe Douglas does his best work. So we'll see if he can pull it off. But I just don't see us having the money for one, a major move, and two, a series of cheap, bargain bin type moves either. So I'll be curious to see how he kind of figures that out, if he even gets the chance to do it. But yeah, if Joe Douglas is gone, I kind of already get the sense that a lot of guys are willing to flow wherever it is Robert Saleh ends up landing. And then for guys that liked Joe Douglas, a lot of those guys will flock to wherever his next opportunity is. Me personally, I would extend JD and let him pick his next head coach. Yeah, I'd be on board for that. Again, a lot of it kind of depends on who we're locked into from a player contract standpoint. Aaron Rodgers being the chief situation there. But I like Joe Douglas. I like him enough to say that he is the reason for any inkling of success that we've had so far, along with Robert Saleh building up that defense. But the negative, or the devil's advocate piece to that as well, is the same blame I give Robert Saleh, I would give Joe Douglas, in that these guys don't know how to identify offensive coaching talent. Ron Middleton, I think, is a solid guy. And then after that, there's a ton of question marks, right? I like the resume of guys like a Tony Dews and a Keith Carter, but you're starting to see here that maybe it's not, all this cracked up to be, considering the level of talent that we have and some of the performances that we've seen. So it is coming from the standpoint that I don't trust him to really identify the correct next head coach, if they're an offensive guy, or the next correct OC. Then I kind of be fine with it from that standpoint too. Harlan Sauce, yeah. Adams' contract is only for this year. Yeah, so safety, Tony Adams, he's going to be on his way. I think that whole safety room is basically done. Isaiah Oliver, Tony Adams, Chuck Clark, Ashton Davis, all those guys are on a one-year deal. So if you don't see guys like if you don't see whoever the next staff is feel comfortable with guys like a Jarius Monroe, or a Tony Adams, for example, or whoever else we have rolling around out there right now, it's going to be a completely different room by far. Will Ulbrich be the new head coach, or will someone else come in? If Ulbrich doesn't at least make it to the AFC Championship, I think you're going to see a new head coach. And then you're also going to see a new defensive coordinator, because I doubt he's going to want to go back to his role. He can say he's had some experience. Here's what he's learned. He's been in a bad situation, so he was just making the best of a terrible predicament, and he can kind of sell it that way. Look at my previous job. Look at now the head coach experience. I actually had an opportunity to try to figure out, and here's what I can do for your organization. That's the problem with the Jets. Robert Saleh sold the Jets a bridge, a culture built with a lot of excuses and effort, and now they realized it. I don't know about that. If you look at every head coach failure that we've had, right, one of the things I like is that every coach essentially has some kind of mantra that they have, right, and they post it up on the walls and do the switch up and everything. I will say there's definitely a level of accountability I'm not comfortable with. Well, here's the thing, right? So you have a guy like me. I put myself in Robert Saleh's shoes from the standpoint that I'm a guy from a leader perspective. I don't like to call guys out on the spot. I think there's certain environments where that's okay. So if I'm doing sports, for example, basketball is my forte specifically. Yeah, when we're piled up and, you got a guy shooting 0 for 12, stop taking shots. I'm calling you out. Here's what I'm seeing. We're going to try to get it figured out in real time. But one of the things I think made Robert Saleh such a great leader is that he was willing to die on his sword to protect his players. So we don't know if he was going savage in the locker rooms when it came to making sure guys can get it corrected, specifically with his defense, since that's his forte. And then in the public, in the media, in the press conferences, we're seeing this guy that, just it looks like he's taking all of the haymakers for the players that should be receiving it. I wouldn't expect him to be able to do a ton to help out the offensive guys, right? Which is where you start to get into the breakdown of he has no idea what he's doing. The offense is never going to figure out a way to turn it around because he just doesn't have the answers. And to me, that's what it boils down to. He hasn't He hasn't hired the right individuals from an OC perspective. And then secondly, he doesn't have the type A personality where even if he doesn't have the answers, he's going to take over and kind of take the Ulbrich approach here, right? Where he's saying, at least from a style of play, at least from, the type of calls that we're playing, the script for the first 15 plays, here's exactly what I want to see. You show me how you'll get it done, and then I'll approve or not, right? So I think that's where you start to see some failures, but I think there's a lot more to it. Obviously, Woody Johnson, they've had their hands in at least a part of every head coach failure here. We've seen it again with Saleh. Saleh's in even more of an unenviable situation. For as much as we wanted Aaron Rodgers, we knew for a long time, plenty of us called it out, he was going to be running the show, and Aaron Rodgers would essentially be delegated to being a DC, but he'll have to speak to all of the head coaching type questions and problems that would arise. Lack of effort, seeing players like, that's one of the things I can say I fully agree with. I hated seeing guys dance. Like, how many press conferences have you seen where in just the thumbnail alone, take a look at Greg Zerline, for example, coming off of this loss. The thumbnail, I think from S&Y, was like him smiling. And I don't expect everybody to be pissed off or anything, but like you would expect there to be some level of concern. Like, you don't see Garrett Wilson necessarily coming out smiling and wanting to crack jokes and stuff after every loss. That's one of the things 100% from like a culture standpoint, from a leadership standpoint, I'd want to have that in check. I don't want you guys feeling like we can have a good time and we just got mollywopped out there on the field. Not a core. They're getting traded so the new regime can build the team the way they want. Some of these pieces, I think you just don't look to trade, right? You're not going to, for the Jets at least, you're not going to come across these levels of talent that often where we actually pick the right guy. We've actually seen them perform the right way. We've actually seen them develop the right way. I know we have a history, no matter the coaching staff necessarily, of finding UDFAs and different stuff like that. But you don't have a lot of situations where you can say we've had one of the top 5 best players at their position. And in some cases, potentially like the top 2 guys and like the top 10, top 12 of their position, right? When you look at a CJ Mosley, a Quincy Williams, for example, or a DJ Reed, Sauce Gardner, a Breece Hall. Garrett Wilson is probably the one with the shakiest conversation. But I would also say he's been the player that's he's had the hardest 2,000 yards, right? Back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons in NFL history, most likely, which is also why I can understand why people get so frustrated with how he's been performing with Aaron Rodgers and how was supposed to be solving everything. And we had all the hype and the buildup over the offseason with the OTAs, training camp, and now we're not seeing any of that actually happen in real games. They take a few weeks or months, but things have to change. Yeah, I think I mentioned this on the video this morning, but or I might have just been responding to a comment. But to me, the New York Jets almost have to go undefeated going into, I think our bye week is week 12. They essentially have to convince me that we've actually figured some things out, or we can do well enough to where another loss or two wouldn't completely amputate us. You essentially have to go undefeated. Now, I don't want to go into the bye week just being at kind of like a 500 record. We're just hovering around, maybe challenging for division lead, or maybe things falling off the wagon. I want us to be all in. The question mark is really, can we sustain whatever kind of success that we've had from a performance standpoint, and not necessarily how do they continue to try to pull themselves out of this hole. Ulbrich is the right guy, but it's going to take a few weeks. Yeah, probably. Unfortunately, he just doesn't have really a few weeks in him. He'll have the remainder of the year, but honestly, we're kind of looking at must-win situations here. I've kind of spoken to. JD has the best GM. What? JD has been the best GM the Jets have had in quite some time. Yeah. I'm a JD guy too. Best we've ever had, and also the best man for the job, decide on what we're doing with the guys he's drafted. Yes. One of the things that really scare me for sure too is I don't want him to necessarily, let's say Joe Douglas does find a way to survive, right? I don't want him to necessarily pigeonhole himself into having to find a guy that shares the same kind of mentality that, Robert Saleh had, or maybe, similar scheme and stuff, in hopes that he can kind of continue along that mold. He's going to also have to switch things up and just recognize if he's really as good as he thinks he is from a talent identification standpoint, he's going to have to be able to mix it up with some other guys here. So we'll see how that pans out. Salah's buddy system screwed us. Keith Carter. I'm still not ready to give up on Keith Carter yet, but I will admit it's not looking good. He's had maybe like 3 weeks over the last 2 years where I've seen instances of saying like, okay, this guy has it, right? Whether he's taken a bunch of roster cast-offs or like second string guys and made them look like starters for a bit, or he just got guys to live up to their level of play that I would expect. But 3 out of, let's say 20 games is not great by any means. So if we got to get him out of here. Again, though, I think I called this out during the offseason, though. I really wish we would give a little bit more of a harder look at some of these more innovative or, extremely consistent guys at the college level. I can't remember his name, but I want to say there's a guy, and it might have been at Northwestern now, but the offensive line coach there, for example, he's churned out a ton of NFL dudes that have looked really, really good going into, the second contract, right? So not just, rookie flashes or anything like that, but we got to find a way to tame that horse. Coach Middleton, solid coach, but just tight ends not doing well. I would disagree, but from a verbiage standpoint, right? I don't think it's that they're not doing well. I think the offense as a whole isn't helping them out, right? So we know tight end is one of the hardest positions. What I can say I've seen, and I haven't been able to watch a ton of all 22 this year because I'm tired. I'm prepping for baby, and the Jets have been depressing the hell out of me, so I just don't want to bring it back up. But from what I have seen on some of the all 22 I've looked at, you don't see Tyler Conklin and Jeremy Rucker running the wrong routes. You don't see a ton of terrible blocking from these guys. You see a lot of missed opportunities. You see a lot of lack of game planning for them. When you look at our third guy, which in this case is Brendan Bates, I want to say did we get him from the Lions? I think we stole him from the Lions in the offseason. And I believe he's also a rookie, or he might have been a UDFA last year. But he looked really good this preseason. When you take a look at the Vikings game, for example, he was missing so many blocks. But what do you really do, right? Not too many people care about tight end 3. For the first 2 guys that are coming up, I don't think it's for lack of inability. I don't think it's for lack of anything they're personally doing. You're seeing the blocks being made. You're seeing them help out in the run game, in the pass game. And then they're just not really getting the opportunities to really ball out in the receiving game. And when they've done, you've seen performances like Tyler Conklin having that 5-catch, 96-yard game or whatever it was. And I think that could be consistent. It's just rare that you get one of those tight ends like a Kelsey or like a Kittle, where you say, all right, we can almost treat him as a wide receiver. So I think Middleton's done well. If we're having to talk about looking at tight end 3 as like, what the hell's happening there. So we have Stigger, Sauce, and Carter, but that's all amongst the whole. Yeah, it's rough. But what I it's a hell of a unit though. Stiggers is a guy that I still believe could probably be starting right now. I think he'd have his bumps and bruises for sure, but I think you largely look at him as a success. Sauce, there's some elements of his game, I think more from a mentality standpoint than anything that I really just don't vibe with. But obviously he's elite. And maybe I was hoping Jeff Ulbrich played him in more man situations or let him travel, but we'll see. And then Carter, we know he's a beast in terms of being in the slot. So you at least have some high value, high performance pieces to really build around there. And maybe, this staff or whoever comes in, they'll have more of an emphasis on safety play and bringing in some guys that don't just have the athletic standpoints, but they also have some of the natural instincts and ability that you will want, which is why I was wishing that we was able to scoop up, I can't remember his name now, but the Minnesota Vikings guy, that I wanted for my first round pick that ended up breaking his leg, and we got stiffed. So Middleton blows our tight ends are agree to disagree. What do you think has led to Rutgers' regression? Man looks unplayable right now. I haven't focused in too much on him, but pretty much the same sentiments I shared already. Flashes are there. I haven't loved the hands for sure, but I think a lot of that was also in broken plays where he's kind of scrambling. And if I'm remembering correctly, if you look at a lot of those, he's not necessarily like running a route, right? It's obviously a scramble drill. And by the time the ball's getting to him, he's kind of doing one of those like falling catch things and kind of ends up leading coverage to be able to make more of a play on the ball than anything else. So I'd have to look at more film and really dive in and say, but I'm not too focused on the tight end group in terms of them being the reason why we're seeing, terrible play. My hot take of Conk and Lazard combining for 1.5. I'm assuming that's 1,500 yards together is looking mid. Let me think. If I had to guess, Dano, you skewed the yardage in, I want to say Lazard's favor, but Conk obviously makes more sense. Yeah, I don't know. Let me know about that one. Middleton, yeah. I also predicted 1 sack per quarter, so 68 total, but I don't know about hitting that without Jermaine or possibly Reddick. Yeah, I haven't kept up with the sack markers. I don't know where we're at right now. Let me think. McDonald has, I think, 6 or 7 to himself now. Quinnen, I think, only has 2. I think Kinlaw maybe has 1. So we're talking about maybe about 10 sacks there. Solomon has 1 or 2. So let's say 11, 12. I don't think anybody, Leonard Taylor has 2 or 3. So I think we're sitting at probably about 15 to 18 sacks over 6 games so far. Yeah, no, that's tough. That looks like a far cry. That might be a stretch for us to get there. Solid players, and had the defense playing well, no matter what personnel. He wasn't terrible, maybe not great, but not terrible. Yeah, I think I mostly agree with that. I will start to say you can clearly see last year things were starting to deteriorate. And that's always when you have to start being extremely concerned if you're a DC guy specifically, right? Or whatever your specialty is. We focus on defense a lot because that's a lot of the head coaches we get. But for your specialty, if you start to see your elite side of the unit deteriorate, what's going to happen is, especially if there's not a lot of successes following that, what's going to happen is that when they start to immediately not see that success again, it's essentially PTSD, right? Now they're going to start saying, well, I got to feed the family, but I don't have to do all this extracurricular and, elite level stuff and start a prep and game planning and, video review and, all that kind of stuff out there on the field, high effort plays. I'm going to get a second contract, off name value alone, and we'll just kind of see how it plays out. That's always the risk. I do say I appreciate the fact that we haven't really seen a huge, roster division or conflict. The defensive side of the ball has definitely done more than their due diligence in not really calling out the offense there. Develop, got you. I'm calling out Wild Way. Yeah, I'm not too surprised, man. It's gonna happen, and it's well deserved. So many years I've wanted to buy Jets jerseys just because I really love the players, whether we drafted them or some guys that we even signed via free agency, etc. There's so many jerseys that I would love to buy, and I still probably will at some point once I get in a good situation now, but once I get in an even better financial situation where I can say I'm splurging to to kind of get some of these jerseys. I just can't do it, man. I take a look at, the lack of success that we really had when you are highlighting back-to-back 7 and 10 seasons. Like, your team isn't doing well, and I I don't want to support them in that standpoint. I'll be as optimistic as I can here, critical but honest, open-minded. But I try to avoid being pessimistic. But I can't do it. The level of support that some guys out here are doing, when I see like my guy Gunny, he's buying gear, merchandise, he's doing his giveaways and stuff. Even my boy Gino. When you see what Green Bean and Matt O'Leary and all those guys are contributing, and I have these awesome setups and stuff, I'm like, that just couldn't be me right now. It couldn't be me because I can't make it feasible in my mind that I'm spending hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars, whether that's to go to a game or just to support some of my favorite players. And then I gotta wake up on Sunday to us struggling to reach 20 yards by, the second quarter. It's wild times. At this point, I'm starting to really struggle about how I'm going to get my boys and or my daughter to become a Jets fan. Time for the wicker chair. On the most side. Hey, if you shoot it like it is Wild Wave, I'm good with it. One of the things I will say I appreciate, it's been slow building up this community, of course, since I don't do the social media, but for the guys that are usually checking out the channel or they're commenting or they're hanging out with me during the live streams, even if they're being pessimistic, there's a lot of truth to what they're saying in most cases. But more importantly, we don't have any of the I'll say like Joe Beningo type guys where they're just loud, they're obnoxious, they're causing all kind of issues and like the chatter when we're bringing guys on to special guests and stuff like that. So that piece I'm really appreciative about. So if the worst thing that's going on is some guys are just being more negative than anything else, one, they have the right to it, but two, it's a pretty good situation still in my opinion. Wild Wave, my guy. Okay, Bates was with the Bears. Yeah, I remember covering him. Did a quick scouting breakdown during the offseason when we scooped him up. But yeah, I remember him doing really good. He looked all right, but obviously he's a UDFA type guy for a reason. And then Lewis Seen, yeah, I'm still pissed about that. I'm still pissed and confused about how that whole thing worked out because I'm trying to recall what I looked at. So apparently we didn't put in a waiver claim, but we were just looking to sign him. And so my thought process was if we put in a claim, a player, to my knowledge, shouldn't be able to reject or refuse or whatever the case is and decide to go somewhere else. They would have to sign to us and then, they can do a holdout or whatever they want to do. But I guess the caveat here is that nobody actually put in a waiver claim, which I don't believe. And so he had freedom of choice to sign with the, I think he went to the Bills. But either way, he would have been a great addition to us, in my opinion. Strongly feel that way. But yeah, at this point, F him. Walking around in Wisconsin with the Jets jersey. Yeah. So I'm in Vegas, and I know the job just found out that I'm a Jets fan. And I've been getting slack for it ever since. I got people from different departments I've only, ever chatted with teams over that happens to stop by, and, they'll throw their jabs and their punches in there. Not that I want to hide it. Very proud to be a Jets fan, but obviously it's a tough conversation to have with most other franchises, right? So, yeah, that's fun. I'm going to get out of here in 3 minutes, though, guys. I will try. This one was out of schedule, right? So the intention is, since I can't do these at night until I figure out what's going on with internet and stuff, I'm going to try to do this on Tuesdays and Thursdays, hopefully at about 2:15, at the latest 2:30. And I'll pretty much just be, chopping it up with you guys during the lunch break or something. So, yeah, look forward to that. But I appreciate you guys coming through, kicking it, hanging it out. I'm going to start to try to look at bringing some guests back on. It's been a minute since I've been able to chop it up with Nick Feria, for example. And I love some of the insights that he has. I know I had a list of guys that I was going to start syncing up with, and then things got super busy. My time obviously is usually caught up between work and the kids, so it's hard to really do stuff with everybody else. But appreciate you guys coming through. Enjoy the rest of y'all days, and go Jets. Try to stay optimistic. Try to celebrate. Hopefully, we come into this next week with a major win for ourselves. So, catch you guys again. Be easy.